My father slid the envelope across the table like he was awarding a medal. He told me flat out that my entire wedding fund had been given to my sister because she deserved a proper wedding. My mother nodded while my sister smiled, but I just looked at Noah. My fiancé stood up, pulled out his phone, and silenced the entire room by asking if he should tell them how he actually makes money. The real shock was never about the lost cash. My name is Kennedy Kelly, and I am 29 years old. I have spent the majority of those 29 years learning how to make myself small, how to fold my edges inward so I would not take up too much space in a room dominated by the ego of the Price family. But tonight, sitting at the mahogany dining table that cost more than my first car, I was not making myself small. I was freezing myself into a statue. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, feeling the linen napkin crisp against my fingertips, watching my father, Richard Price, slide a thick cream envelope across the polished wood. It moved with a soft hiss, stopping exactly between the salt cellar and the crystal butter dish. Richard cleared his throat. It was a sound that usually commanded silence in boardrooms, a sound that signaled a decision had been made and there was no room for negotiation. He did not look at me. He looked at the envelope. "Your mother and I have been talking," he started, his voice smooth, practiced. It was the voice of a man who could sell a drowning man a glass of water. "We have been looking at the numbers for the wedding. For your wedding." I felt Noah stiffen beside me. His knee bumped mine under the table. A solid, warm anchor in a room that suddenly felt like a meat locker. I did not look at him. I kept my eyes on Richard. "And?" I asked. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. "And we have decided," my mother, Dana, chimed in, leaning forward with a smile that did not reach her eyes, "that it is best if we reallocate the funds." Reallocate, I repeated. It was such a sterile word, a corporate word. "Maddie needs this," Richard said, finally looking up. His eyes were hard, daring me to challenge him. "We are giving your wedding fund to your sister, all of it." The air left the room. I looked across the table at Madeline, my sister, the golden child. She was swirling her Cabernet in her glass, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She did not look guilty. She looked vindicated. "She deserves a proper wedding," Richard continued, his voice gaining strength as he justified the theft. "After what happened with that first husband of hers, she needs to restore her image. She needs a day that screams dignity. She needs to get her honor back. Kennedy, you understand that, don't you?" "My honor," Maddie said softly, looking at her reflection in the wine. "It has been such a hard year for me. Kenny, you know that." I knew nothing of the sort. I knew she had married a man my parents adored because he drove a Porsche, and she had divorced him 6 months later when the Porsche turned out to be leased and his temper turned out to be volatile. But in this house, Maddie's mistakes were tragedies happening to her, while my achievements were merely lucky breaks. "So," I said, the word tasting like ash, "you are taking the $40,000 you promised us for the venue and catering, and you are giving it to Maddie for her second wedding." "It is not taking, Kennedy," Dana sighed, acting as if my factual statement was a personal attack on her parenting. "It is prioritizing. Maddie is in a crisis. You are fine. You and Noah, you are simple. You do not need the fanfare." Maddie set her glass down. "Exactly. Honestly, Kenny, a big ballroom wedding would look ridiculous for you. It is just not your vibe. You should do something small, maybe a backyard barbecue or a potluck. It would be so much more authentic to who you are." She made "who I am" sound like a synonym for cheap. I waited for the tears. They usually came. When I was 10 and they gave my birthday party slot to Maddie because she had a dance recital the next day and needed cheering up. I cried. When I was 18 and they skipped my high school graduation to tour a sorority house with Maddie, I cried. But now, at 29, the tears did not come. Instead, a cold clarity washed over me. I looked at the envelope. I looked at Richard's arrogant jawline. I looked at Dana's pleading, manipulative eyes. I did not speak. I just turned my head slowly to the right and looked at Noah. My family called him passable. They called him steady. They meant these words as insults, implying he was boring, unambitious, a piece of background furniture that I had dragged into their glossy showroom of a life. Noah Bennett, with his off-the-rack blazers and his quiet demeanor, they thought he was weak. They were wrong. Noah was not eating. His fork was resting perfectly parallel to his knife. He was watching Richard with an intensity that I had never seen before. It was not anger. It was the look of a scientist observing a particularly interesting, yet repulsive, specimen under a microscope. Richard noticed the stare. He wiped his mouth with his napkin, annoyed that his decree was being met with silence rather than submission. He needed to reassert dominance. He needed to remind everyone why he was the head of the table. He turned his sneer toward Noah. "Don't look so glum, son," Richard said, letting out a short, dismissive chuckle. "You can still scrape together something nice for Kennedy." "What is it you do again? I always forget. Something with computers? Fixing servers? Tech support?" Dana giggled. "Oh, Richard, be nice. Everyone has to start somewhere." "I'm just saying," Richard said, leaning back, expanding his chest. "If you worked in finance or law, maybe this would be a setback, but for a guy who fixes laptops, a backyard wedding is probably a relief. Less pressure, right?" The room went silent. The insult hung in the air, gross and heavy. Noah stood up. The motion was fluid, controlled. He did not shove his chair back. He lifted it slightly as he rose so it made no sound against the floor. He buttoned his jacket. He looked tall, much taller than he usually seemed. Maddie rolled her eyes. "Oh, great. Are we doing a dramatic exit? Just sit down." "Noah?" Noah ignored her. He turned his gaze to Richard. His face was completely blank, devoid of the polite deference he had shown them for 3 years. "Mr. Price," Noah said. His voice was low, terrifyingly calm. "Sit down, Noah," Richard commanded, pointing a finger at the table. "We are not done discussing the logistics." Noah reached into his inner pocket and pulled out his phone. He did not look at it. He kept his eyes locked on my father's face. "You asked me what I do," Noah said. "It was a joke," Richard snapped. "God, you have no sense of humor." "You think I fix computers?" Noah continued, unbothered. "You think I am simple. You think I am safe." He tapped the screen once, then placed the phone face up in the center of the table, directly in front of Richard's plate. The screen was glowing. It displayed a single document. I could not see the details from my angle, but I saw the header. It was a logo, a shield with a ridge. "Mr. Price?" Noah said, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Should I tell them what I do for a living?" Maddie's smirk faltered. "What is he talking about?" "Or," Noah said, leaning in slightly, his hands resting on the back of his chair, "would you prefer to explain to your wife and daughter why you moved $150,000 out of the family trust at 9 o'clock this morning, 6 hours before you told Kennedy there was no money?" Richard's face went the color of milk. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Richard stammered, "because from where I stand," Noah said, "it looks like you are not robbing Peter to pay Paul. It looks like you are robbing your mother to pay for your ego." I looked at Noah. I looked at the phone. And then I looked at my father, who was suddenly sweating despite the air conditioning. And that was when I realized Noah was not surprised by the envelope. He was not surprised by the announcement. He had not stood up to defend my honor. He had stood up because he had been waiting. He had been waiting for this exact moment, this exact dinner, this exact insult. He had brought the ammunition. He was just waiting for Richard to pull the trigger. The room spun. The present faded. The mahogany table. The crystal glasses. The terrified look in my father's eyes. It all blurred. The sensation of being invisible is not cold. It is familiar. It feels like the rough carpet of the staircase in the old house on Elm Street, where I used to sit for hours, listening to the parties happening downstairs. I was 7 years old. Downstairs. The chandelier was bright. Downstairs. Maddie was wearing a velvet dress and reciting a poem for my parents' friends. I could hear the applause. It sounded like rain. "Isn't she spectacular?" My mother's voice drifted up the stairs. "She is a star." My father agreed. I looked down at my own dress. It was cotton, plain, comfortable. I had drawn a picture earlier that day. I wanted to show them. It was a picture of us, me, Mom, Dad, Maddie. But in my drawing, we were all the same size. I had walked into the living room an hour ago, holding the paper out. "Not now. Kennedy," Dad had said, brushing past me to adjust Maddie's bow. "Can't you see your sister is preparing?" "Go upstairs, Kenny," Mom had whispered, steering me toward the hall. "Stay out of the way. We need the space for the guests." I sat on the stairs, clutching the drawing. I folded it. Then I folded it again, and again, until it was just a tiny, hard square of paper. I put it in my mouth and chewed it until it was pulp, swallowing the family portrait one bite at a time. If I was not in the frame, I could not be pushed out of it. That was the lesson. That was the rule. But 22 years later, watching Noah tower over my father, I realized I had broken the rule. I had brought someone into the frame who refused to be pushed, and he had just set the house on fire. If you walked into the dining room of the Price family home, you would immediately understand the hierarchy of our household without a single word being spoken. The east wall, the one that caught the morning light perfectly, was a shrine. It was a gallery dedicated to the brilliance of Madeline Price. There were framed ribbons from second-grade gymnastics meets. There were participation trophies from debate tournaments where she did not even place, polished until they gleamed like gold. There was her high school diploma, framed in mahogany, and photos of her prom, her debutante ball, and her first wedding. The wall was a chaotic, loud testament to the fact that Maddie existed and that her existence was an event to be celebrated. My history, on the other hand, lived in the negative space. I was the beige paint between the frames. I was the dust that settled on the top of her trophy case. It was not that I had no achievements. I had good grades. I had art awards. But whenever I brought them home, my mother, Dana, would smile that vague, distracted smile and tell me to put it on the fridge. The fridge was temporary. The wall was permanent. The wall was for people who mattered. This dynamic did not end when we left school. It simply evolved. I built a career out of being unseen, which is perhaps why I became a graphic designer. I liked the idea of creating the structure that made other things look beautiful. I started my own studio, Juniper and Company Creative, right out of my apartment. It was not a hobby. By the time I was 26, I was pulling in six figures, managing contracts for mid-sized tech firms, and paying my own mortgage. I was proud of the stability I had built from nothing to my parents. However, I was merely coloring. "How is the little drawing business going, Kennedy?" my father would ask at Sunday brunch, usually while signaling the waiter for more coffee. He never waited for an answer. "Maddie just got promoted to Senior Assistant Brand Coordinator. It is a very important title." He never mentioned that Maddie's rent was paid by a standing order from his bank account, or that her title was at a company owned by his golf buddy in the Price household. The appearance of success was always more valuable than the reality of hard work. I learned to stop sharing my client wins. I learned that my independence was viewed as an adorable little experiment, whereas Maddie's dependence was viewed as a delicate flower needing protection. The only person who saw the difference, who really looked at me and saw a person rather than a prop, was my grandmother, Evelyn Price. Grandma Evelyn was a woman made of steel wrapped in soft cashmere. She smelled of lavender laundry detergent and the sharp, clean scent of peppermint candies she kept in her purse. She was the one who taught me that silence did not mean weakness. She would sit with me in the garden while Maddie performed karaoke in the living room for the guests. "Let them make the noise, Kennedy," she would whisper, pressing a wrapped mint into my palm like a secret. "You are the water that runs deep. Shallow water is always loud. It was Evelyn who understood Noah before anyone else did. I remember the first time I brought Noah to meet the family. It was a Tuesday, a casual drop-in. I had warned him. I told him they would judge his shoes, his car, and his handshake. Noah just shrugged and said he was dating me, not my father's portfolio. He walked into the house wearing a gray cable-knit sweater that had clearly been through the wash a few dozen times. It was fraying slightly at the cuffs. He drove a sedan that was 10 years old and safe. He did not bring wine. He brought a loaf of sourdough bread he had baked himself because he knew my mother liked toast. Richard looked at the bread like it was an alien artifact. Dana asked him what he did, and when he said he worked in forensic accounting and data security, their eyes glazed over. They heard computers. They heard tech support. They heard boring. But Evelyn? Evelyn watched him. She watched how he held the door for me, not with a flourish, but with a simple, unconscious habit. She watched how he listened to Richard's endless monologue about the stock market without interrupting, but also without fawning. She watched how he sat still, his hands resting on his knees, completely comfortable in his own skin. Later, while my parents were in the kitchen loudly whispering about how Noah seemed a bit simple and wondering if I was settling because of my age, Evelyn pulled me aside. "He is steady," she told me, her eyes sharp and clear. "Your father likes fireworks. Kennedy, he likes things that go boom and sparkle, but fireworks burn out and leave a mess. That boy in there, he is a hearth fire. He will keep you warm when the winter comes." "You keep him. Mom and Dad think he is dull," I said, feeling the old shame creeping up my neck. "Your parents think a lot of things," Evelyn scoffed. "They think debt is prestige. They think noise is power. They are wrong." She squeezed my hand. "He sees you. Kennedy, that is rare." I held on to that. I held on to it when Richard made jokes about Noah's little computer job. I held on to it when Dana asked if Noah could afford to take me to a real restaurant for our anniversary. They had written a script for us in their heads, in their story. Kennedy was the plain daughter who found a plain man, and we would live a small, plain life in the shadow of Maddie's brilliance. They did not hate me. I knew that. Hate requires passion. Hate requires energy. What they felt for me was a benign indifference. I was the backup plan. I was the child who did not need tending. So I was not tended. It hurts to be hated, but it hollows you out to be ignored. And then there was the money. The wedding fund. Growing up, it was always spoken of as a vague, collective future. The girls' wedding fund. It was not a specific bank account number I had ever seen. But it was a promise. It was a lure. However, I always had a distinct memory of where it actually came from. It was not from Richard's bonuses. It was not from Dana's family. I remembered being 12 years old, sitting on the floor of Evelyn's library. She was signing papers with a heavy fountain pen. Richard was standing over her, looking impatient. "It is for the girls, Richard," she had said, her voice stern. "For their future. Not for your investments. Not for the house." "I know, Mother. I am just handling the administration." Richard had replied, his voice silky. "I will keep it safe. You make sure it is there when they need it," she warned. That memory had been buried under years of gaslighting and family drama. But as I sat at that dinner table, watching Noah stare down my father, the memory surfaced with the force of a tidal wave. The money wasn't a gift from my father to give or take away. It was a legacy from my grandmother. And for 20 years, Richard had acted as the gatekeeper, convincing himself that holding the key made him the owner of the house. He had underestimated two things. He had underestimated the memory of the daughter he ignored, and he had vastly, fatally underestimated the simple man she was going to marry. The momentum of the Price family machinery shifted gears the moment Madeline brought Bryce home. Bryce was everything Noah was not. He was loud. He was shiny. And he worked in something vague but expensive called commercial real estate acquisitions. He laughed at my father's jokes before the punchlines landed. He complimented my mother's interior design choices with the vocabulary of a catalog. He was the perfect accessory for Maddie, a man who treated conversation like a tennis match, where the goal was to see who could drop the most names in a single volley. Within 2 weeks of knowing him, Maddie was engaged. The speed of it was dizzying. But the narrative my parents spun was even faster. According to Richard and Dana, Maddie's first marriage, a 2-year disaster involving a courthouse ceremony and a reception at a local Italian restaurant, did not count. It was a practice run. It was a youthful indiscretion. "Maddie deserves a real wedding this time," my mother said to me one afternoon, flipping through a bridal magazine as if she were planning a coronation. "She needs to erase the memory of that last mess. She needs an event." The phrase real wedding became a weapon. They used it in every conversation. They used it to describe the 300 guests Maddie wanted. They used it to justify the imported flowers and the live orchestra. And by default, every time they said it, they were categorizing my upcoming nuptials as something else, something fake, something less than. Noah and I wanted a simple ceremony. We had found a small botanical garden near the city limits, a place with old oak trees and a glass house that smelled of rain and ferns. We wanted 40 guests. We wanted a taco truck and a playlist made by our friends. We wanted to pay for it ourselves, mostly, but we were counting on the modest portion of the family fund that had always been promised to us to cover the venue and the photographer. My parents looked at our plans with the same pity one might offer a 3-legged dog. "Are you sure this is safe?" my mother asked, looking at the brochure for the botanical garden. "It looks a bit damp, Kennedy, a bit makeshift. You do not want your wedding to look like a picnic, do you?" "We like it, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "It feels like us." "Well," she sighed, "I suppose if Noah cannot manage anything else, we have to make do. Are you sure he can handle the costs? I mean, really handle them? Marriage is expensive. Kennedy, it is not just love and fresh air." She said it with a concerned furrow in her brow, masquerading her snobbery as maternal worry. She wanted me to admit that Noah was inadequate. She wanted me to ask for help, so she could deny it or attach strings to it. I bit my tongue. Noah has it covered, but the timeline of their betrayal began to reveal itself in small, careless ways. The Price family was arrogant, and arrogance often leads to sloppiness. It happened on a Tuesday, 3 days before the infamous dinner. I had stopped by my parents' house to drop off some mail that had been sent to my old address. The house was empty, or so I thought. I walked into the kitchen and saw a heavy binder sitting on the island. It was open. It was a contract for the Grand Monarch Hotel Ballroom. I froze. The Grand Monarch was the most expensive venue in the state. It had a waiting list of 18 months. I looked closer at the page. The date was set for June. My jaw tightened, but then my eyes drifted to the bottom of the page, to the signature line and the deposit date. The deposit of $15,000 had been paid 3 weeks ago. I felt a cold flush spread through my chest. 3 weeks ago, my father had told me over the phone that the family fund was doing well, but that he needed to review the liquidity before cutting me a check for my venue. He had stalled me. He had lied to me. While he was telling me to wait, he was writing a check for Maddie. I flipped the page. There were receipts for a wedding planner, a deposit for a couture gown, a retainer for a videographer who charged more than my car was worth. The dates were all from the last month. They had drained the fund before they even told me it was gone. The dinner was not a discussion. It was not a family meeting. It was a theatrical performance designed to inform me of a robbery that had already taken place. I took photos of the documents with my phone. My hands were shaking, but the images were clear. When I got home, I showed them to Noah. I expected him to be angry. I expected him to yell. But Noah just sat at our small kitchen table, scrolling through the photos on my phone with a calm, focused expression. He zoomed in on the signatures. He checked the dates. "Richard signed the venue contract as trustee," Noah said, pointing to the scrawl at the bottom of the page. "Not as father, as trustee." "Does that matter?" I asked, pacing the living room. He is my dad. He manages the money. It is all the same pot. It is not the same pot, Noah said, his voice quiet but firm. If it is a trust, there are rules. There are beneficiaries. There are fiduciary duties. He cannot just treat it like his personal piggy bank because Maddie decided she wants a pony show. He looked up at me. Kennedy, do you have a copy of the trust documents? The ones your grandmother set up? No, I said. Dad always handled it. He said it was too complicated for us to worry about. Of course he did, Noah said. He set the phone down. He is counting on you not asking questions. He is counting on the fact that you have been trained to accept whatever scraps they throw at you. The next day, the manipulation shifted targets. They knew I would be upset, so they needed to secure their flank. They needed to neutralize the only person who might actually object to their theft, Grandma Evelyn. I went to visit Evelyn and found my mother already there, sitting in the sunroom, pouring tea with a sweetness that made my teeth ache. We just want Maddie to be happy, don't we? Mother, Dana was saying, patting Evelyn's hand. She has been through so much. This wedding, it is her chance to start over, to hold her head high. Evelyn looked tired. She was 84, and while her mind was sharp, her energy was finite. She hated conflict. My parents knew this. They weaponized her desire for peace. But what about Kennedy? Evelyn asked, looking at me as I walked in. There was enough for both. I made sure there was enough for both. Oh, Kennedy is doing something very intimate, Dana said quickly, dismissing my entire existence with a wave of her hand. She and Noah want a small backyard thing. They do not need the big budget. It would be a waste, really. Maddie needs the production value. You know how people talk. I don't like it, Evelyn murmured, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. It doesn't feel fair. Fair is about giving everyone what they need, Dana said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Kennedy is strong. She is independent. Maddie is fragile right now. If we don't support her, I don't know what will happen. You don't want to see her broken again, do you? It was a masterclass in emotional blackmail. If Evelyn objected, she was hurting Maddie. If she insisted on fairness, she was causing a family rift. And, Dana added, delivering the final stroke, we want to take you with us to celebrate. A little engagement trip. Just the family. To Charlotte. We can go shopping for your outfit for the wedding. It will be lovely. Just us girls and Richard. I saw the hesitation in Evelyn's eyes, but I also saw the longing. She loved to be included. She loved to feel useful. A trip? Evelyn asked. Yes, Dana beamed. Next weekend, we will fly down, stay at the Ritz, and just celebrate. It will be a fresh start for everyone. I sat there, paralyzed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell Evelyn that they were buying her silence with a plane ticket and a hotel room. I wanted to tell her that the money they were spending on this celebration was likely coming from the same account they had just looted. But I couldn't, not without looking petty, not without looking like the jealous sister my parents always accused me of being. That sounds nice, I lied, my voice hollow. Noah did not like the sound of the trip when I told him later. He was sitting at his computer, dual monitors glowing in the dark of our apartment. They are taking her out of town, he said, not looking away from the screen. They are isolating her. They are just taking her shopping, I said, trying to convince myself. They do this sometimes. Do they? Noah asked. When was the last time they took your grandmother on a trip without you? Without needing something from her? I tried to remember. I couldn't. They are going to close the deal, Noah said. They need her to explicitly agree to the transfer of funds, or at least to appear to agree, so that if you ever challenge it, they can say it was her wish. They are manufacturing consent. What can we do? I asked, feeling a rising panic. We let them go, Noah said. He turned to face me. We let them think they have won. We let them think they have successfully moved the pieces off the board, and while they are busy patting themselves on the back. I am going to find out exactly whose name is on that money." He paused, his eyes dark. "Because I have a feeling Richard is not just a trustee. I have a feeling he has been playing a shell game for a very long time. And he just got sloppy." My parents and Maddie left for the airport on a Friday morning. They looked like a picture of familial bliss. Maddie was wearing a white sundress and a sun hat, ready for her real wedding kickoff. Richard was loading the designer luggage into the SUV. Dana was guiding Grandma Evelyn down the front steps, holding her elbow with a grip that looked supportive, but felt restraining. I waved from the driveway. I watched them drive away. I did not know it then, but I was waving goodbye to the last shred of illusion I had about my family. I did not know that the trip to Charlotte was not a celebration. It was an abandonment. And I did not know that the real wedding they were so desperate to fund would cost them everything they actually owned. The sliding glass doors of the departure terminal at Charlotte Douglas International Airport opened with a rush of stale air conditioning and the frantic energy of 1,000 people running late. I had insisted on driving my own car to the airport to see them off. I told myself it was to help with the luggage, but deep down, I think I went because I did not trust them to get Grandma Evelyn from the curb to the gate with the dignity she deserved. Evelyn was dressed as if she were going to church or a tea with the governor. She wore her best teal suit, the one with the pearl buttons, and she clutched her small, structured handbag with both hands. She looked terrified of being a nuisance. She walked with small, careful steps, apologizing to the air every time someone brushed past her with a rolling suitcase. "I hope I do not slow them down," she whispered to me as we approached the check-in counter. "I know Maddie is anxious to get there." "You are fine, Grandma," I said, adjusting the collar of her jacket. "You are the guest of honor. They wait for you." Richard, Dana, and Maddie were already at the counter. My father was handling the passports with the performative efficiency of a man who wants everyone in line to know he is a frequent flyer. Maddie was standing a few feet away, her head bent over her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen, likely posting a status update about her wedding weekend getaway. I wheeled Evelyn's small suitcase up to the scale. "And one for Evelyn Price," Richard said to the agent, handing over a stack of IDs. He did not look at his mother. He looked at the baggage weight display. The agent, a tired woman with kind eyes and a tight ponytail, typed on her keyboard. She frowned. She typed again. Then she looked up, confused. "I am sorry, sir," she said. "I have 3 confirmed seats. Richard, Dana, and Madeline. I do not have a ticket for an Evelyn Price." The world seemed to stop spinning for a second. "That is impossible," Richard said, but his voice lacked the genuine outrage of a man who has been wronged. It was hollow. It was rehearsed. "Check again. I booked them all together. I am looking at the entire record." "Sir," the agent said, "I see the 3 of you booked 4 weeks ago. There was never a 4th passenger on this itinerary." I looked at my father. Then I looked at my mother. It was quick. It happened in the space of a heartbeat. Dana shot a glance at Richard, a sharp, terrified, warning look that said, "Stick to the script." It was not a look of surprise. It was a look of complicity. "Well," Richard stammered, putting on a show of checking his pockets as if a plane ticket might materialize from his wallet. There must have been a glitch, a system error." "Can we buy one now?" I asked, stepping forward, my voice hard. "Just get her a seat on the same flight," the agent typed. "I have 1 seat left in first class. It is $2,400. Richard let out a sharp hiss of breath. $2,000? That is ridiculous. I am not paying $2,000 for a computer error." "Then I will pay it," I said, reaching for my purse. "No." Evelyn's voice was small, barely a whisper. I turned to her. She was trembling. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide with a specific kind of humiliation, the shame of feeling unwanted. "It is too much money, Kennedy," she said. I probably just got the dates wrong, or I forgot to tell Richard something. It is my fault." She looked at the agent. I am so sorry to trouble you. Miss, I am so sorry for the confusion. She was apologizing for existing. She was apologizing for the inconvenience of her own presence. Maddie finally looked up from her phone. She did not look concerned. She looked annoyed. Dad, we are going to miss security. If Grandma isn't coming, we need to go. I have a fitting at 4. She is right, Dana said, grabbing her carry-on. She touched Evelyn's shoulder. A light, meaningless pat. Mother, we are so sorry. Kennedy can take you home, can't she? We will FaceTime you from the hotel. It will be just like you are there. Go, Evelyn said, forcing a smile that broke my heart. Go on. Have a wonderful time. Richard didn't even look me in the eye. Sorry, Kenny, take care of her. And then they turned their backs. They walked toward the security checkpoint. My father, my mother, and my sister, leaving an 84-year-old woman standing in the middle of the terminal in her best suit, holding a bag she would not need. They did not look back once. The drive back to my parents' house was silent. I tried to make conversation. I tried to turn on the radio, but Evelyn just stared out the window, watching the highway blur by. She held her handbag on her lap like a shield. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked massive and empty. I walked her inside. I expected her to cry. I expected her to go to her room and lie down. Instead, she went to the back door and walked out into the garden. It was late afternoon. The sun was slanting through the trees, casting long shadows across the rose bushes she had planted 30 years ago. Evelyn walked over to a cluster of white roses. She reached out and touched a petal, her hand shaking. I am sorry, I heard her whisper to the flower. I stood in the doorway, my throat tight. Grandma? She turned to face me. Her eyes were dry, but they looked older than they had that morning. The sparkle was gone. They did not forget. Kennedy, she said. Her voice was steady, terrifyingly so. They did not make a mistake. I know, I said. They decided, she said, pulling a dead leaf from the stem. They looked at the cost of the ticket, and they looked at me, and they did the math. They decided I was not important enough to be there. They are selfish, I said, walking over to her. They are awful. No, she said. They are finished. I am done making excuses for people who treat me like furniture. She looked at the house she had paid for, the house she allowed them to live in. Take me to your house, Kennedy. I do not want to sleep here tonight. That night, at my apartment. Evelyn went to sleep early in the guest room. I sat at the dining table with Noah. The anger in my chest was a physical weight, heavy and hot. I had opened my laptop. I was searching for anything. Elder abuse laws, power of attorney revocation forms, reviews of the venue Maddie had booked. I don't get it, I said, slamming the laptop shut. Why go through the charade? Why dress her up? Drive her to the airport, and then humiliate her? Why not just say, Grandma, you are not invited? Noah was standing behind me. He was looking at a printout of the trust structure he had managed to dig up from public records. Because they needed her out of the house, Noah said. I turned to look at him. What? They needed a reason to leave the house in a rush, and they needed a reason for her to be confused and disoriented, Noah said. But more than that, I think they just ran out of money. Literally, I think they spent every liquid cent they could access on the deposits, and they couldn't afford the 4th ticket. They have jobs, I argued. Dad makes good money. Does he? Noah asked. Or does he just live in a house his mother pays for, driving cars he leases, spending trust money he's supposed to be guarding? Noah placed a hand on my shoulder. Kennedy, people who have nothing to hide do not leave their mother at an airport check-in counter, he said. They did that because they are panicked. They are moving fast because the walls are closing in. He looked toward the guest room where Evelyn was sleeping. They made a mistake today, Noah whispered. They thought they were discarding a burden, but they just handed us the only witness who matters. The morning sun did not bring warmth. It brought the cold, hard light of reality. Grandma Evelyn was sitting at my kitchen island, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. She looked smaller than she had yesterday, stripped of the armor of her best suit and the hope of a family vacation. But as I watched her, a memory clawed its way to the surface of my mind. It was something she had said years ago, right after Grandpa died. When Richard had moved his desk into her study, "I will let the children manage it," she had told me then, her voice trembling slightly. "Richard says it is safer. He says the world is too complicated for me now." I looked at Noah. He was already dressed, his laptop open, his face set in that terrifyingly calm expression he wore when he was hunting. "Grandma," I said softly, pulling up a stool beside her, "when Dad took over the finances, did you sign a power of attorney?" Evelyn blinked, pulling herself out of her thoughts. "I think so. He brought a notary to the house. He said it was so he could pay the bills if I got sick. He said it was standard." "And the bank accounts?" Noah asked, not looking up from his screen. "Did you add him as a joint owner, or just an authorized signer?" I am not sure," she admitted, shame coloring her cheeks. "He just puts the papers in front of me, and he points to the line, and I sign. I trusted him. He is my son." "That is exactly what he counted on," Noah said. He closed his laptop and stood up. "Get your purse. Evelyn, we are going to see a friend of mine." Marisol Grant did not look like the kind of lawyer my father would hire. Her office was in a converted warehouse downtown, not a glass tower, and she wore a leather jacket over her blouse. But Noah had told me she was the best elder law attorney in the state, a woman who ate predatory children for breakfast. We sat in her conference room, the air thick with the smell of old paper and justice. Marisol listened to the story of the airport without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen digging deep into the paper. When I finished describing how they had left Evelyn standing at the check-in counter, Marisol finally looked up. Her eyes were dark and furious. "Abandonment is rarely an isolated incident," Marisol said, her voice clipped. "When a family member leaves a vulnerable senior at an airport, or a hospital, or a mall, it is usually because the burden of the charade has outweighed the benefit of the control, or more likely, they have already gotten what they wanted, and the person has become disposable." She turned to Evelyn. "Mrs. Price, I need you to think very carefully. This wedding fund Kennedy talks about, was it just a savings account?" Evelyn shook her head. "No, it was a trust. My husband and I set it up when Kennedy was born. We called it the K Fund. It was supposed to be for her education, or a house, or a wedding. Richard was the trustee because Kennedy was a minor." "And when I turned 21? I asked. "It should have passed to you," Marisol said, answering for her. "Unless there was a clause extending the trusteeship, but even then, he has a fiduciary duty. He cannot touch a cent of that money for himself, and he certainly cannot give it to another beneficiary just because he feels like it." Noah slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of a bank ledger he had managed to access through a shared family login I had not used since college. "Look at the dates," Noah said. I followed his finger. On January 15th, there was a withdrawal of $15,000 from the account labeled K-Trust Operating. "Now look at this," Noah said, pulling up a photo on his phone. The photo I had taken of Maddie's wedding venue contract. The deposit for the Grand Monarch Hotel was $15,000. The check was dated January 16th. "He drained it," I whispered, the nausea rising in my throat. "He didn't just give family money to Maddie. He took the money specifically legally designated for me, and he handed it to her." "It gets worse," Noah said. He pointed to another line item. 2 days before the airport trip, he transferred $50,000 to his personal checking account. He labeled it management fee. Marisol let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "A management fee? For a dormant trust? That is not a fee. That is embezzlement." "He told me he needed to move things around for tax purposes," Evelyn said, her voice barely audible. "He brought me a stack of papers last week. I was so tired. I had just taken my blood pressure medicine. He said, "Sign here, Mother. It is just to keep the IRS happy." "He tricked you," I said, grabbing her hand. "He knew you were medicated." "It fits the timeline," Noah said, looking at Marisol. "He drains the accounts to pay for Maddie's dream wedding. He realizes he has overextended. He can't afford the fourth plane ticket, and he definitely can't afford to have Evelyn asking questions about her monthly stipend, which is about to bounce. So he dumps her at the airport, hoping the shock and shame will keep her quiet until he can figure out his next move." I sat back, feeling the pieces click into place. It was not just cruelty, it was a cover-up. My parents were not just bad people, they were criminals. They had wrapped their greed in the language of family values. They had justified stealing my future by claiming Maddie deserved it, using their favoritism as a shield for their theft. "So, what do we do?" I asked. "Do we sue them?" "Oh, we will do more than sue them," Marisol said, cracking her knuckles. "We are going to freeze them. I can have an emergency petition for an accounting and a temporary restraining order on the assets filed by noon. But we need to serve them, and we need to confront them before they can hide the rest of the money. They are in Charlotte," I said. "They won't be back until Sunday." Noah looked at me. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "No," he said. "They are landing at 5 o'clock on Sunday. They will be walking out of that arrivals gate, tan, rested, and expecting to come home to a quiet house and a compliant grandmother." He turned the phone around, showing the flight itinerary. "I think we should welcome them home," Noah said. "I think we should meet them right there in the baggage claim, and I think we should bring the paperwork with us." I looked at Evelyn. She was not crying anymore. She was looking at the ledger, at the numbers that proved her son's betrayal. She looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw the steel beneath the cashmere. "Let's go," she said. The fear in my chest evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I wasn't the shadow in the corner. I was the plaintiff. And my father was about to learn that the only thing more expensive than a real wedding was a felony fraud charge. The automatic doors of the arrivals hall slid open with a rhythmic, mechanical whoosh, spitting out streams of weary travelers, families reuniting, and business people rushing to the taxi line. I stood near the baggage claim exit, my feet planted firmly on the linoleum floor. To my left stood Noah, his posture relaxed, but his eyes scanning the crowd with the precision of a hawk. To my right was Marisol Grant, holding a thick manila envelope against her chest like a shield. And right in front of us, standing straighter than I had seen her in years, was Grandma Evelyn. We did not have to wait long. They emerged from the secure area like royalty returning from a conquest. Richard was pushing a cart stacked high with designer luggage. Dana was walking beside him, laughing at something he had said, her skin glowing with an expensive facial. And Maddie was leading the parade, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors and holding a coffee cup as if it were a scepter. They looked victorious. They looked like people who had successfully edited their reality to exclude the unpleasantness of the previous Friday. Then, Richard looked up, his eyes swept over the crowd, looking for the driver he had likely hired. His gaze slid past a group of teenagers, past a woman holding a sign for a limousine service, and then it landed on us. He stopped. The luggage cart jerked to a halt. Dana, not paying attention, bumped into his arm. "Richard, what on earth?" she started. Then she followed his gaze. Her smile didn't just fade, it evaporated. Maddie stopped a few steps ahead, turning back with an annoyed huff. "Dad, why are we stopping? The car is—" She saw us. She lowered her sunglasses, her brow furrowing in confusion that quickly curdled into irritation. "What is this?" Maddie asked, her voice carrying over the low hum of the terminal. "A welcome committee?" They walked toward us, slowly, the confidence draining out of their posture with every step. Richard recovered first, or tried to. He put on his boardroom mask, the one he used when a deal was going south. Kennedy, he said, nodding as if running into me was a mild coincidence. Mother, I didn't expect… Well, we were going to call you from the car. I bet you were, I said. My voice was calm. It scared me how calm I was. Dana stepped forward, her laugh brittle and high-pitched. Oh, don't be so serious. Look at you all. Standing there like you are at a funeral. We had a lovely time. We missed you. Mother. Really, it was just such a mix-up with the tickets. A mix-up, Evelyn repeated. She did not raise her voice. She did not sound like the confused old woman they had left at the curb. Is that what we are calling it? We can talk about this at home, Richard said, gripping the handle of the luggage cart. This is not the place. Actually, Marisol stepped forward, blocking his path. This is exactly the place. Mr. Price, I am Marisol Grant. I represent Mrs. Evelyn Price. Richard looked at Marisol, then at Evelyn, then at me. A lawyer? You brought a lawyer to the airport? Mother, what is getting into you? This is ridiculous. What is ridiculous? Marisol said, her voice cutting through his bluster like a scalpel. Is the accounting on the K-Trust? I have some questions regarding the management of the assets. Specifically, the transfer of funds that occurred last week. She held out the envelope. Richard stared at it. He did not take it. Take it, Marisol said. It is a formal demand for an immediate accounting and a notice of a temporary freeze on all trust-related accounts, pending an audit for breach of fiduciary duty. The color left Richard's face. It wasn't a gradual fade. It was instant, beneath his fresh tan. He turned a sickly, grayish shade. He knew those words. He knew exactly what they meant. Fiduciary duty? He hissed, lowering his voice. This is family money. I am the trustee. I have discretion. You have an obligation to the beneficiary, Marisol corrected. And the beneficiary is Kennedy Kelly, not Madeline Price, and certainly not the Grand Monarch Hotel. Maddie gasped. She stepped up to Marisol, invading her personal space. Excuse me? That is my wedding you are talking about. My parents are paying for it. It is none of your business. It is my business when your parents use your grandmother's money to pay for it without her consent, I said. Stepping in between them, Maddie spun on me. Oh, I knew it. I knew you would do this. You are just jealous. Kennedy, you have always been jealous. You couldn't handle that Mom and Dad wanted me to have a nice day, so you had to go and poison Grandma against us. You are ruining everything. I am not ruining your wedding. Maddie, I said. I am just stopping you from stealing mine. Stealing? Dana shrieked. People were starting to stare. How dare you use that word? We raised you. We gave you everything. You gave me nothing that wasn't already paid for by her, I said, pointing at Evelyn. Evelyn stepped forward. She looked small next to the luggage cart, but her presence was immense. She looked at Richard, her son, with a mixture of heartbreak and exhaustion. Richard, she said softly, I sat in this airport for 3 hours on Friday. I waited. I kept thinking you would come back. I thought, surely, my son would not just leave me here. Richard looked at his shoes. Mother, it was a mistake. The flight was full. Stop lying, Evelyn said. It was the first time I had ever heard her interrupt him. Just stop. You took the money. You took Kennedy's money. You took my money. And when you ran out, you decided I was too expensive to bring along. She took a breath, her hand trembling slightly as she clutched her purse. I just want to know one thing. Richard, what am I in your plans? Am I just a bank account that breathes? Richard opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked trapped. He looked at the envelope Marisol was still holding. He reached out and took it, his fingers twitching. He opened the flap. He pulled out the top document. I saw his eyes scan the header. Petition for removal of trustee. Allegation of embezzlement. You can't do this, Richard whispered. The deposit is non-refundable. If you freeze the accounts, the checks will bounce. The venue will cancel. That sounds like a personal problem, Marisol said. Maddie let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. You are destroying my life. And for what? For him? She pointed a manicured finger at Noah. Noah, who had been silent this whole time, standing like a guard dog at the edge of the fray. You are doing all this because you think you need to protect your little boyfriend? Maddie sneered, her eyes wild. Kennedy, wake up. He is a loser. He fixes computers. He can't even afford to buy you a ring. So you have to sue your own father to pay for your wedding? It is pathetic. She looked Noah up and down, curling her lip. Why don't you get a real job, Noah? Then maybe my sister wouldn't have to tear this family apart for cash. The air around us seemed to snap. I saw Marisol smirk. I saw Richard look up from the papers, his eyes wide with a sudden, dawning horror, realizing that Maddie was poking a sleeping bear. Noah shifted his weight. He did not look angry. He looked bored. He looked at Maddie with the same expression one might use when looking at a toddler throwing a tantrum in a supermarket. I have a job, Maddie, Noah said. His voice was low, steady, and carried more authority than my father's shouting ever had. Oh, really? Maddie laughed. Geek Squad doesn't count. Noah took a step closer. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't puff out his chest. He just looked at them, really looked at them, with eyes that had seen things much worse than a greedy suburban family. I analyze financial fraud for a living, Noah said. I track people who think they are smarter than the banking system. I track people who think they can hide assets in shell companies. I track people who exploit the elderly. He paused, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. And the reason I never told you, Noah continued, his gaze shifting to Richard, is because I only share my life with people I respect. I chose silence because I knew, the moment I met you, that you were not worthy of the truth. Richard swallowed hard. He looked at the envelope in his hand, then at the man he had called simple. Now, Noah said, gesturing to the exit, I suggest you call your lawyer. You are going to need one who specializes in criminal defense. The silence that followed Noah's declaration was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum, the kind that happens right before a structure implodes. My father, Richard, was staring at Noah as if my fiancé had just grown a second head. My mother, Dana, was blinking rapidly, her brain trying to recalibrate 3 years of condescension into something that might save her current social standing. Noah reached into his jacket pocket again. This time, he did not pull out a phone. He pulled out a leather credentials wallet. He flipped it open with a single, practiced motion and held it up for Richard to see. I had seen it before, of course, but seeing it here, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the arrival hall, it looked different. It looked lethal. The badge was silver and navy. The text was embossed. Sable Ridge Forensics, Director of Asset Recovery and Fraud Investigation. Sable Ridge, Richard whispered. The name meant something to him. I could see the recognition flicker in his eyes. Sable Ridge was the firm that corporations called when their CFOs disappeared with the pension fund. They were the firm that cleaned up the messes Wall Street tried to bury. We specialize in complex financial litigation support, Noah said, his tone conversational, like he was discussing the weather. Specifically, we trace misappropriated assets in trust structures and elder abuse cases. I lead the Southeast Division. Maddie made a noise that sounded like a hiccup. She was looking at the badge, and then she was looking at Noah. And for the first time in her life, she looked small. All her little manipulations, her receipt shuffling, her strategies to divert funds, she suddenly realized she had been performing magic tricks in front of a man who designed the trap doors. You investigate people like us? Maddie asked, her voice trembling. I investigate criminals, Noah corrected her gently. If you see yourself in that description, Madeline, that is a confession, not an accusation. This is absurd, Richard stammered. Trying to regain his footing, he waved a hand dismissively, though his hand was shaking. We are not criminals. We are a family. This is a private family matter. You have no right to turn this into a federal case just because you want to impress my daughter." "Mr. Price," Noah said, stepping closer. "The moment you signed your name as a trustee, you ceased to be just a father in the eyes of the law. You became a fiduciary. That means you have a legal obligation to act in the best interest of the beneficiary. When you took $50,000 of Kennedy's money and used it to pay for a wedding that has nothing to do with her, you broke that law." "I intended to pay it back," Richard shouted. A few travelers turned to look, but Richard was too panicked to care. "I was moving assets. It is called liquidity management." "It is called commingling of funds," Noah said. "And in my line of work, we call it the first step toward prison." He looked at my father with a gaze that was almost pitying. "You asked me why I never told you what I did," Noah said. "You asked why I let you think I fixed laptops? Because you were ashamed," Maddie spat out, trying to claw back some ground. "Because you knew you weren't on our level." Noah laughed. It was a dry, short sound. "I did not tell you because I wanted to see who you were when you thought no one powerful was watching," Noah said. "Success does not buy respect, Maddie, and true respect does not need to shout about its success. I have spent every dinner, every holiday, listening to you mock me. I listened to you belittle Kennedy, and I learned everything I needed to know about your character." Marisol stepped forward then. She checked her watch. "Speaking of character," she said, "I just received confirmation from the court clerk. The emergency petition has been filed. The judge has granted a temporary restraining order on the K-Trust accounts and any personal accounts linked to recent transfers from the trust. As of 10 minutes ago, Mr. Price, your assets are frozen." Richard pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen frantically. Then he tapped it again. He looked up, his face gray. "My cards," he whispered. "You froze my cards?" "We froze the money you stole," Marisol said. "If your personal money is mixed in with it, well, that is something you will have to explain to the forensic accountant we are sending over on Monday." Dana let out a sob. She looked at Richard, realizing that the credit card in her purse was now just a piece of plastic. She turned her eyes to Noah. She softened her face, tilting her head in that way she used when she wanted a discount at a boutique. "Noah," she pleaded, reaching out as if to touch his arm. "Noah, please, you are family. You are going to marry Kennedy. Do not do this to us. Think of the scandal. Think of how this will look for everyone. We can work this out. We can sit down and talk." Noah did not pull away, but he did not lean in. He stood like a statue. "I am thinking of family, Dana," Noah said. "I am thinking of the 84-year-old woman you left at an airline check-in counter because she was too expensive to bring along." He gestured to Evelyn, who was standing beside me, her head held high. "I stand with the people you leave behind," Noah said. "I stand with the one left at the check-in." "This is humiliating," Maddie shrieked. Tears were streaming down her face now, ruining her makeup. "You are doing this on purpose. You are trying to embarrass us in public, Kennedy. Tell him to stop. Tell him he's ruining my wedding." I looked at my sister. I looked at the woman who had demanded my college fund, my attention, and now my wedding fund. I looked at the tears that were falling not for the pain she had caused, but for the consequences she was facing. "No," I said. "What?" Maddie gasped. "I said no," I repeated. "This isn't humiliation. Maddie, this is responsibility. You have spent your whole life thinking you are the main character and everyone else is just a prop to pay for your scenes. Well, the props are walking off the set." "You are cruel," Dana hissed at me. "After everything we did for you." "You did nothing for me," I said, my voice steady. "You did everything for yourselves. Even my wedding fund was just a savings account for Maddie's next party." Richard looked at Noah. "You can't prove intent. You can't prove I wasn't going to pay it back." Noah smiled. It was the smile of a predator who has already closed the cage door. "Mr. Price?" Noah said. I have the emails you sent to the wedding planner. I have the notes you put in the bank transfer memos. And I have the testimony of the bank manager who warned you 3 times that the transaction was irregular. The truth does the work. Richard, I just organized the paperwork. Noah turned to Marisol. Do we have everything we need? We do, Marisol said. You have been served. Mr. Price, we will see you at the mediation table on Wednesday. I suggest you bring checkbooks. Plural. Noah turned to me. He offered me his arm. Ready to go home? He asked. Yes, I said. We turned around. Evelyn walked between us, one hand on my arm, one hand on Noah's. We walked away from the baggage claim, away from the screaming sister and the stunned parents and the frozen credit cards. We walked out into the cool evening air of Charlotte. And for the first time in 29 years, I did not look back to see if they were watching, behind us. I heard Maddie's voice rising in a fresh wave of hysteria, shouting at her father to fix it. But I knew, and Noah knew, and even Richard knew, that this was one thing he could not fix. The invoice had finally arrived, and the Price family was bankrupt of excuses. The fallout from the airport confrontation was not immediate silence. It was an explosion. By Monday morning, my phone had become a device of psychological warfare. My parents did not call me directly. That would have required a level of confrontation they were not equipped for without a lawyer present. Instead, they unleashed the flying monkeys. My Aunt Linda, a woman who had not sent me a birthday card in 6 years, called me at 7 a.m. to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. It is just money, Kennedy, she hissed into the phone. How can you be so greedy? Your sister finally finds happiness, and you want to drag her into court over a few $1,000s? I always knew you were jealous of her, but this is sick. It is not a few $1,000s, Linda, I said, trying to keep my hand from shaking. And it is not about jealousy, it is about theft. It is family, she screamed. You do not sue family. I hung up, then I blocked her number. Then came Uncle Mike, then came my cousin Sarah. The script was identical, which meant Richard and Dana had been up all night coaching them. The narrative was set. Kennedy is bitter. Kennedy is failing in her career and wants a payout. Kennedy is letting her new, controlling fiancé destroy the Price family legacy. But the real battlefield was social media. Maddie did not name me. She was too savvy for that. She posted a photo of herself on Instagram, looking tearful and fragile in a dimly lit room. The caption was a masterpiece of vague victimhood. Some days, the people you share blood with turn out to be the ones who bleed you dry. I am heartbroken that my own sister would try to ruin the happiest time of my life out of spite and greed. Please pray for my family as we deal with this betrayal. Love and light only. The comments were a cesspool. Stay strong. Queen, jealousy is a disease. Hope she gets well soon. Who does that to their sister? I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through the hate, feeling like I was suffocating. Stop looking at it, Noah said, gently taking the phone from my hand. They believe her, I said. They all think I am the villain. They think what they are told to think, Noah said. But juries do not read Instagram comments. Juries read bank statements. My father, however, was trying to ensure it never got to a jury. That afternoon, Noah received an email from Richard's personal attorney, a man named Gelson who usually handled Richard's real estate closings. It was a cease and desist letter, threatening Noah with a lawsuit for defamation, tortious interference, and harassment. It claimed Noah had impersonated a federal officer at the airport, a lie, since Noah works for a private firm, and demanded he recant his accusations immediately. Noah didn't even blink. He forwarded the email to Marisol with a subject line that just read, Exhibit G. He is terrified, Noah observed. He is throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. But they are so confident, I said, pacing the living room. Maddie is posting like she has already won. Dad is threatening us. Do they know something we don't? Do they have an ace up their sleeve? They have arrogance, Noah said. That is not an ace. That is a blinder. We went to Marisol's office late that afternoon. The mood was different now. The initial adrenaline of the airport had faded. Replaced by the grim, tedious work of forensic accounting, Marisol had the bank records spread out across the conference table. I found something, Marisol said without preamble. I was looking at the management fees Richard has been pulling. It is not just the $50,000 last week. He has been skimming off the top for 5 years. She pointed to a column of figures. $200 here, $500 there. It is small enough to go unnoticed if you aren't looking, but big enough to pay for a car lease over time. And it all goes to an account listed under RP Consulting. That is Richard Price. But here's the kicker, Noah added, sliding a calendar across the table. I cross-referenced the dates of the larger withdrawals and the dates where Evelyn's signature appears on the authorization forms. He pointed to a date 3 years ago. Here, a transfer of $10,000 to Richard's personal investment account, signed by Evelyn Price. Okay, I said. So she signed it. Look at the date. Kennedy, Noah said. October 14th. I frowned. The date felt familiar. Then I remembered. That was the day Grandma had her cataract surgery. Exactly, Noah said. I checked her medical claims history. She was under conscious sedation that afternoon. Richard went to the recovery room, put a pen in her hand while she was still groggy, and had her sign away $10,000. He pointed to another date. July 12th, root canal, Valium prescription filled that morning, signature obtained that evening. I felt sick. It wasn't just financial abuse. It was physical exploitation. He had waited until she was weak, until she was drugged, to rob her. He is a monster, I whispered. He is a desperate man living above his means, Marisol said. But this is the nail in the coffin. This invalidates the signatures. It proves undue influence. But wait, Evelyn said. She was sitting in the corner chair, quiet as usual. She stood up and walked to the table. She looked at the trust document Marisol had unearthed from the original filing cabinet at the courthouse. This is not the family trust, Evelyn said, tapping the paper. What do you mean? Marisol asked. It says, the Price Family Trust. No, Evelyn said, her voice shaking slightly. My husband and I had a family trust, but this account number ending in 44, this was the Kennedy Fund. The room went silent. The Kennedy Fund? I asked. When you were born, Evelyn said, looking at me. My husband was worried. He saw how Richard and Dana were with Maddie. He saw the favoritism even then. He said, Evie, that little girl is going to need a safety net because her parents are going to spend everything on the other one. So we took a portion of our savings, specifically from the sale of the lake house, and we put it in a separate trust. It was never family money. It was your money. Richard was just the custodian because you were a baby. Marisol grabbed the document and flipped to the addendum. Her eyes widened. She is right, Marisol said. The language here is specific, for the sole benefit of Kennedy Kelly. Richard isn't just a trustee mismanaging a general pot. He is a thief stealing from a specific, named beneficiary, which means, Noah said, a hard edge entering his voice, that Maddie isn't just spending her grandmother's money. She is spending your money, directly. And if we prove fraud, Marisol said, looking up with a shark-like grin, we don't just freeze the remaining assets. We claw back the distributions. That $50,000 sent to the Grand Monarch? The court can order it returned. What happens to the wedding then? I asked. The venue cancels the contract unless Maddie pays it back immediately, Marisol said. And since Maddie doesn't have a job, and Richard's accounts are frozen, there is no wedding, Noah finished. I sat down. The magnitude of it hit me. They weren't just fighting to keep the money. They were fighting to keep the illusion alive. If the money was pulled back, Maddie wouldn't just be embarrassed. She would be liable for breach of contract. She would be financially ruined. They are going to come for us with everything they have, I said. When they realize we know this, they are going to get dangerous. They already are, Noah said. That is why we need to get ahead of the narrative. How? I asked. You stop being invisible, Evelyn said. I looked at my grandmother. She was holding her phone. She had opened Facebook, an app she barely knew how to use. Maddie is telling a story, Evelyn said. It is time we told ours. I am not posting a status. Grandma, I said. I am not getting in the mud with her. No, Noah said. We are not posting a status. We are releasing a statement, a joint statement, from the actual owner of the money. He looked at me. Are you ready to stand next to her? Publicly? No more hiding in the background while Maddie takes the spotlight? I thought about the airport. I thought about the management fees taken while my grandmother was recovering from surgery. I thought about the years of being told I was less than, that I didn't deserve a real wedding. I am ready, I said. That evening, we did not post a rant. We posted a single photograph on my professional studio page, which I shared to my personal profile. It was a picture of me and Grandma Evelyn, sitting in her garden, holding hands. The caption was simple, written by me, approved by Marisol. Protecting our elders is not greed. Demanding accountability is not jealousy. The truth is in the ledger, not the rumors. I stand with Evelyn Price, today and always. It wasn't a scream, it was a declaration of war, and within an hour, the phone calls from the flying monkeys stopped, because suddenly, they weren't sure they were betting on the winning horse anymore. My father, Richard, saw the post, and for the first time, he realized that his daughter, the invisible Kennedy, had just stepped into the light, and she was casting a very long shadow. The conference room on the 14th floor of the Mediation Center smelled of lemon polish and stale anxiety. It was a neutral ground, theoretically, but as we sat on opposite sides of the long, oval table, it felt more like a battlefield where the weapons were manila folders and bank statements. On one side sat my parents and Madeline. Richard looked diminished without his usual backdrop of the country club or his home office, under the harsh fluorescent lights. His tan looked orange, and the bags under his eyes were heavy. Dana was clutching a tissue, dabbing at dry eyes, preparing for a performance of maternal grief. Maddie sat with her arms crossed, staring at the wall, radiating a petulant fury that seemed to say this entire legal proceeding was just an inconvenience to her wedding schedule. On our side sat me, Noah, Marisol, and Grandma Evelyn, the mediator, a retired judge named Mr. Henderson, with thick glasses and a voice like gravel, shuffled the papers in front of him. He did not look impressed by Richard's suit or Dana's tears. He looked like a man who had seen every variation of family greed there was. We are here to discuss the petition for the removal of the trustee and the restitution of assets to the Kennedy Fund. Mr. Henderson said. His tone was dry. Let us skip the theatrics. I want to hear the timeline. Richard opened his mouth, likely to launch into a speech about family values and misunderstandings. But Mr. Henderson held up a hand. Not from you. Mr. Price, he said. He turned to Evelyn. Mistress Price, you are the grantor of this trust. Can you tell me, in your own words, what happened last Friday? The room went deadly silent. Evelyn placed her hands on the table. They were steady. She did not look at Richard. She looked straight at the mediator. My son told me we were going on a family trip to celebrate my granddaughter's engagement, Evelyn said. Her voice was soft, but in the quiet room, it carried like a bell. I dressed up. I packed my bag. When we got to the counter, the agent told us there was no ticket for me. Richard did not buy one. He did not offer to buy one. He and his wife and daughter walked through security and left me standing there. She paused, taking a breath. I realized then, she continued, that I was not a person to them. I was an expense they could no longer afford. Dana let out a sob. Mother, that is not fair. We were so stressed. It was a terrible mistake. A mistake is forgetting your toothbrush, Mrs. Price, the mediator said. not looking up from his notes. Leaving an 84-year-old woman alone at an airport is a choice. He turned to Marisol. Counsel, show me the money. Marisol stood up. She did not speechify. She just laid the papers down, one by one, like tarot cards predicting a disaster. January 9th, Marisol said. Transfer of $12,000 from the K-Trust to Richard Price's personal checking account. She placed a second paper next to it. January 10th, a check for $12,000 written from Richard Price's personal checking account to Dream Day Planners. She continued the rhythm. January 15th, withdrawal of $8,000. January 16th, deposit of $8,000 to Lux Catering. February 1st, withdrawal of $20,000. February 2nd, wire transfer to the Grand Monarch Hotel. The visual was devastating. It was a perfect, indisputable chain. There was no liquidity management. There was just a pipeline siphoning money from my future to Maddie's fantasy. These funds, Marisol said, tapping the stack, were designated for the sole benefit of Kennedy Kelly. They were used to pay for Madeline Price's wedding. That is conversion of assets. That is theft. Richard shifted in his chair. It was a loan, he said, his voice tight. I intended to pay it back. The market has been volatile. I was just bridging the gap. A loan requires documentation, Noah said. He spoke without looking at Richard, his eyes fixed on a document in his own hands. A loan requires terms, interest rates, repayment schedules. Did you draft any of those, Richard? I am the father, Richard snapped. I do not need to draft a contract to borrow money from my own family. You do when you are the trustee, the mediator corrected him. And you especially do when the money does not belong to you. We were going to pay it back, Maddie burst out. Once the wedding was over, and Dad got his bonus, he was going to put it back. Kennedy is just ruining everything because she is jealous that I'm having a real wedding and she is having a potluck. About that, Noah said. He slid a single piece of paper across the table toward the mediator. It was a printout of an email. This is an email sent from Richard Price to the wedding planner at the Grand Monarch, Noah said. Dated 3 weeks ago. Please read the highlighted section. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses. He read aloud. Do not worry about the deposit deadline. I have a dedicated family fund that I manage. It is a surplus account, basically sitting there doing nothing. I will pull the $50,000 from there. No one checks it but me, so we can expedite the payment without any red tape. The air left the room. Surplus account, I whispered. That is what you called my life savings? A surplus account? Doing nothing, Marisol repeated. He admitted in writing that he knew no one was checking. He admitted he was using it because it was easy, not because it was legal. Richard's face was pale. He looked at the email as if it were a bomb. He couldn't deny it. It was sent from his work address. Dana reached for Richard's arm, her tears flowing freely now, but they felt tactical. Mr. Henderson, please, we are good people. We just wanted to give our daughter a beautiful day. Evelyn would have wanted Maddie to have it if she had just asked. The mediator looked at Evelyn. Mrs. Price, did you authorize these transactions? Did you tell your son he could use Kennedy's trust to pay for Madeline's wedding? No, Evelyn said. I told him specifically that the money was for Kennedy. He knew it. He just didn't care. Richard slammed his hand on the table. I did it for her. He pointed at Maddie. She was the one crying every night. She was the one demanding the imported flowers and the 10-piece band. She said if she didn't get this wedding, she would be the laughingstock of her friends. I was just trying to be a good father. Maddie's mouth dropped open. You are blaming me? You told me you had it covered. You said, don't worry, Princess. Daddy has a special account. You never told me you were stealing it from Kennedy. You knew, Richard shouted. You knew I was tight on cash. You didn't care where it came from as long as the check cleared. This is disgusting, I said. They stopped yelling. They looked at me. You are eating each other, I said. You are sitting here, facing fraud charges. And you are fighting over who is more to blame. You don't care about the money. You don't care about Grandma. You just care about not getting caught." Marisol cleared her throat. She looked like a shark smelling blood in the water. "Here is the reality," she said. "We have the bank records. We have the email admission. And," she paused for effect, "we have the internal compliance logs from your bank." Richard froze. "What?" "Noah has a friend in the fraud department at your bank." Marisol lied smoothly. Or maybe she wasn't lying. With Noah, it was hard to tell. "They flagged your transfer on February 1st. They called you. The compliance officer noted that you said, and I quote, 'The beneficiary is aware and has verbally approved the transfer.' You lied to the bank." "Richard, that is wire fraud." Richard sank back into his chair. He looked small. He looked like a man who realized that the walls of his life were not made of brick, but of paper, and someone had just lit a match. "This is not a civil dispute anymore," Marisol said, leaning forward. "This is criminal. If we walk out of here without a signed agreement, I am taking this file to the district attorney, and given the amount, over $100,000 in total misappropriation, we are talking about a felony. We are talking about prison time." Dana gasped, clutching her chest. Maddie looked at her father with horror, not because he might go to jail, but because she realized her safety net had just been incinerated. "What do you want?" Richard whispered. His voice was raspy. "I don't have the cash to pay it all back today. I just don't—" "We know," Noah said. "We saw your personal accounts. You are leveraged up to your eyeballs." Marisol slid a thick document across the table. "First, you resign as trustee immediately," she said. "We appoint an independent fiduciary. Second, you agree to a repayment plan, 20% of your income, garnished directly, until the principal plus interest is repaid. Third, you sign a confession of judgment. If you miss a single payment, we don't have to sue you. We just file the judgment and seize your assets, your car, your house, everything." "And Maddie?" Richard asked, looking at his daughter. "Maddie is a beneficiary of your generosity." Noah said, "If the wedding venue cancels because the funds were recalled, that is between her and the vendor. But the $50,000 deposit? If the hotel refunds it, it goes to Kennedy. If they don't, Maddie owes it to the trust." Maddie went white. "I don't have $50,000. "Then you better hope the hotel is feeling generous," Noah said. "Or you better start looking for a job." The mediator looked at Richard. "Mr. Price, this offer is a gift. If I were the judge in this case, I would not be so lenient. You have 5 minutes." The room was heavy with the weight of the decision. Richard looked at the document. He looked at Dana, who was uselessly weeping. He looked at Maddie, who was looking at him with resentment. Then, he looked at Noah. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the man he had mocked, the man he had called simple, the man he had asked if he fixed computers. He realized now that Noah had not been fixing computers. He had been dismantling Richard's life, screw by screw, with the precision of a surgeon. Noah didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just sat there, his hands folded on the table, watching my father weigh the cost of his ego against the cost of his freedom. "Tick-tock, Richard," Noah said softly. "The district attorney goes to lunch at noon." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the hum of the air conditioning unit. Richard Price looked at the confession of judgment. Then he looked at me. A flicker of the old arrogance returned to his eyes, the ghost of the father who used to silence me with a single look across the dinner table. He pushed the paper away, just an inch, but the gesture was loud. "You won't do it," he said. His voice was gaining a little strength, feeding off his own delusion. "You are not going to send your father to jail. Kennedy, you hate conflict. You hate people talking about us. If you file this, the whole town knows, the club knows, you will be the daughter who destroyed her family for a check. You don't have the stomach for it." He was betting on the girl I used to be. He was betting on the 7-year-old chewing up her drawing on the stairs. He was betting on the 20-year-old who apologized when people bumped into her. I leaned forward. I placed my hands flat on the cold mahogany table. "You are right about one thing," I said, my voice steady. "I used to be afraid of the noise. I used to be afraid of making you look bad, but you cured me of that when you left Grandma at the airport." I looked him dead in the eye. "I am not asking for permission to be treated kindly anymore. Dad, I am not negotiating for my dignity. You think I am afraid of the scandal? I am the one holding the match. You are the one covered in gasoline." Richard flinched. Noah stood up then. It was the second time he had risen to his full height in a confrontation with my father, and the effect was just as paralyzing. He didn't shout. He just picked up the trust document and flipped to page 12. "Clause 7, subsection C," Noah read, his voice calm and lethal. "Any unauthorized withdrawal exceeding $10,000 triggers an automatic external audit and a mandatory report to the IRS regarding potential tax evasion on gift limits." Noah looked up. "If you do not sign this agreement to restitute the funds, I am legally obligated to mail a copy of this transcript to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division by 5 o'clock today. We are not just talking about the district attorney anymore. Richard, we are talking about the feds." The blood drained from Richard's face so fast he looked like a wax figure. The threat of prison was abstract. The threat of the IRS was a terror he understood intimately. Marisol slid the pen across the table. It clicked against the wood. "Sign it," Marisol said, "or I call the courier." Beside him, Maddie let out a low wail. She realized what was happening. The pen moving toward Richard's hand wasn't just signing away his control, it was signing away her dream. "But the deposit," Maddie sobbed, grabbing Richard's sleeve. "Dad, if you admit it is stolen money, the hotel has to give it back. They will cancel my date. I have already sent the save the dates. You can't let them do this." Richard shook her off. He didn't look at her. He looked at the pen. He looked at the future that was rapidly shrinking into a jail cell. He picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly the signature looked like a seismograph reading of an earthquake. But he signed. He signed the resignation of trustee. He signed the repayment plan. He signed the confession of judgment. When he finished, he dropped the pen and slumped back in his chair. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw it. The power was gone. The looming giant of my childhood had dissolved into a frightened, greedy old man who had gambled his family and lost. "Are we done?" he whispered. "We are done," I said. "You have 30 days to make the first payment." We walked out of that building into the bright, blinding sunshine of the afternoon. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that finally felt like it belonged to me. The weeks that followed were a blur of administrative justice, the Grand Monarch Hotel, upon receiving the court order regarding the disputed funds, immediately voided Maddie's contract and returned the $50,000 deposit to the trust. Maddie tried to fight it, but without the family fund to back her up. She was just another client who couldn't pay the bill. The real wedding evaporated, leaving her with a closet full of non-refundable custom napkins and a fiancé who suddenly had a lot of questions about her family's actual net worth. Richard and Dana retreated. They lost their access to Evelyn's accounts. Marisol set up a new system. An independent professional trustee now managed the assets, with a co-signing requirement for any expense over $500. My parents were put on a strict allowance. No more country club dues paid by Grandma. No more management fees. They were forced to live the life they could actually afford, which was a punishment worse than jail for people like them. But the real ending of the story didn't happen in a lawyer's office. It happened 2 months later. In late April, it happened in the garden behind Evelyn's house, the same garden where she had stood alone among the roses, apologizing for being a burden. We didn't have 300 guests. We had 30. We didn't have a 10-piece orchestra. We had a playlist coming from a high-quality speaker Noah had set up. We didn't have imported peonies. We had the roses my grandmother had tended for 40 years. I wore a dress I bought off the rack, and I felt like a queen. Evelyn sat in the front row. She was wearing a new dress, one she had picked out herself, paid for with her own money that she now controlled. When I walked down the aisle, the grass path between the flower beds, she was the first person I saw. She wasn't looking at the ground. She was beaming. When the ceremony was over, and Noah and I were officially husband and wife, I knelt beside her wheelchair. "We did it," I whispered. "You did it." She corrected me. She reached out and cupped my face. Her hands were warm. "You know, Kennedy, for a long time, I thought keeping the peace was the most important thing. I thought if I just stayed quiet, the storm would pass." She looked over at the table where Noah was laughing with his friends, the computer guy who had outsmarted a dynasty. "But storms don't pass when you ignore them," she said. "They just wreck the house." She reached into her purse and pulled out a check. It wasn't for me. It was for the organization I had started the week after the settlement. I had taken the recovered wedding fund, the money Richard had tried to steal, and I had used half of it to launch a legal defense fund for the elderly in our county. We called it the Evelyn Project. It helped seniors audit their finances and recover assets stolen by family members. "I am proud of the project," Evelyn said, "but I am prouder of the woman running it." She squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with tears. "Hate is loud, Kennedy. Greed is loud. But today, look around you." I looked. I saw my friends eating tacos from the truck we had hired. I saw Marisol toasting with a glass of champagne. I saw Noah, my steady, brilliant husband, walking toward me with a plate of cake. "This is quiet," Evelyn said. "Peace is quiet, and you fought for it." She pulled me close, her voice a whisper against my ear. "Today you are not just marrying a person. You are marrying the version of yourself that no longer begs to be seen." I kissed her cheek and stood up to meet Noah. He took my hand, and we walked out onto the dance floor, a patch of grass under the stars. We were not rich in the way my father wanted to be. We didn't have the status my sister craved, but we had the truth. We had the money that belonged to us, and most importantly, we had the respect that comes from knowing exactly what you are worth and refusing to settle for a penny less. My father and mother were not there. Maddie was not there. They were not invited, and for the first time in my life. Their absence did not feel like a hole. It felt like space for me to finally, truly, exist. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It is a long journey from being the invisible child to standing up in a courtroom, but sometimes you have to burn the bridge to stop the enemy from crossing. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe while doing your own forensic accounting? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading your stories. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to Morgan Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need the courage to stand up for themselves. Until next time, stay safe and check your bank statements. Have you ever had to stand up to protect a loved one from your own family?